Hello.
Hi, Chanelle. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm so excited that we get to have this time to talk. For those who don't know, Todd and I met last year at the TEDxNaperville conference, and we just wanted to have a chat and talk about what it means to survive 2020 and what it means to try to thrive in 2021. Yeah, it's a lot has gone down this week.
A lot, yeah. The premiere of 2021 is a wild one.
I mean, they really started us off with a bang, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've been like talking about doing this for a long time, and we, made the choice to just kind of wait until we
Mm,
felt a little bit more stable. And
right.
then this week came and let us know that there's not going to be any kind of stability.
Mm,
We have to
sadly.
be able to navigate through.
Hmm. And I'd like to add that the conversations you and I have had in private have been really refreshing for me. Just the space that we create for each other and the way that we listen to each other is, I think, part of the reason why we wanted one of those conversations to be available for other people to to hear.
You're good
So,
people, Todd.
oh, so are you. I'm so glad we've kept in touch.
Yes. So I guess we should start off by really kind of talking about like what we do
Yeah.
for a living. For those who don't know, why don't you start, Todd?
Okay. Well, I do a number of things. I'm a musician. I have a band called the Giving Tree Band, but due to COVID and other challenges, we've been a little bit on hiatus for the last year plus. And I have worked in a hospital setting part-time doing mindfulness training and addiction counseling. I have a podcast called Kind Mind where I share my inspiration from art and science, psychology, which I've studied throughout my adult life, and my spiritual training and seeking, which has been an essential part of my life for the past maybe almost 20 years. I've been practicing meditation and traveling to other parts of the world to learn more about mysticism. We've gone to India. And in between all of that, I try to speak to schools and at events like we met at and share what I can and be um, be of service to the community. So and I know that you've been an advocate, a strong advocate for similar things that I care about. But I believe you're in a new position too, right?
Yes, I am.
Oh yeah, I'm excited to hear how that's going.
Yeah,
So now your turn.
I guess I'm a risk taker. I don't know if I would ever really like categorize me as like a big risk taker, but apparently I am because I switched jobs in the middle of a world pandemic. Um,
Wow.
yes.
Yeah.
So I am now the managing director of public and community affairs for Teach for America Chicago, Northwest Indiana. Such a mouthful. Um, but basically, it's a long title to describe someone who is in the community, building relationships for the organization, making sure that the teachers that we're developing at TFA are teachers who are equity minded, are engaged in the community, and don't think about their classroom or the screen of their computer for right now as a silo. It's important for them to know and be a part of the community in which they teach in. And so I try to build community partnerships that will allow them to know about their community and know about their families, know about their students, and then teach from that place. I also just build relationships with public officials, with ISB, with the Board of Education, with elected officials who have a lot of influence and power to affect and impact education in Chicago and Northwest Indiana, so that we can be on the same accord and push for things that are going to benefit the students that we're trying to serve. And that might look like pushing for policy changes and recommendations that are in the benefit of our families that we serve, or that eliminate a lot of the barriers that have been put that don't allow a lot of quality people of color to get into the education field, and really try to get some of that away so we can have a teaching force here that reflects the students that we're trying to teach. And so, yeah, that's a little bit like a high level version of like what I do in this role. But outside of that, I'm a trained actress. And I love the arts. I write. And so I try to infuse my art as well with my passion for educational equity. I, like you, have many hats. I do photography. I love taking photos and seeing the world in different ways and through different eyes. And yeah, it's just a little bit about me. Oh,
I love that.
I launched an organization a couple of years ago called Positively Melanin. It's been on like hiatus right now just because I needed some time for myself to just breathe and take in all the things that are happening around me. I think sometimes we mistake this need to like overproduce, even in chaos. And I didn't want to put myself in that position, but Positively Melanin is an organization where we highlight Black professionals in various different career fields to provide representation so that young professionals can see what they can be, and provide a pathway to mentorship. Because I know when I was coming into the professional field, it was really hard to navigate because I didn't see people who looked like me. And I didn't know if I could actually do the roles that were around me because I didn't see anyone looking like me that were doing it. And the negative perception of the South Side of Chicago specifically that has been like perpetuated in media really tells a single story that doesn't represent me and my people. And so I really try to focus specifically right now on the South Side of Chicago, professionals who are doing great work from the arts, from the medical field, from education, so that young people can see themselves.
Could we jump off that for a few minutes? The South Side of Chicago, the challenges, the misperceptions, and what are from your point of view the origins of those of the issues?
Well, racism. I mean, I'm from Oakland, California originally, and
I was born in Oakland, California.
yeah, see, that's why.
So we have a lot of we have a lot aligned.
Yeah, Oakland produces the best people, in my opinion. I know I'll get in trouble for saying that, but I think it's true.
That's special.
I'm from Oakland, and there's like a melting pot kind of feel about Oakland. And I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist or inequity doesn't exist.
But that's very different than Chicago.
Very different than Chicago.
And I think, not to cut you off there, sorry, but I think that some of the racism you're talking about in Chicago is just so misunderstood because it's like, this is Chicago. It was in the North, right? So what issues could there have been compared to what was in the South part of the United States?
Yeah, it's, I mean, Chicago is wildly known as one of the most segregated cities in America. And I didn't hear that rhetoric growing up, so I didn't know that to be true until I moved here after college. I just thought, oh, Chicago is a big city. Everybody talks about Chicago, so it has to be, a lot of like cultures melting together. And
right.
And it's not.
And it's not.
Yeah, it's really sad when I think about how we are just sectioned off, and how the equity issues is because of that, right? So if you go to the north side, there's a lot of white people there, well off, great schools, great opportunities. And then the farther south you go, you see how there's a disinvestment in the communities, where there are more Black people. Or even on the west side, there's a disinvestment in the communities where there are Latinx people. And that's by design. It's like the system is doing exactly what it's designed to do, to perpetuate inequity. And yeah, that was a really rude awakening when I came to Chicago and really saw that. Not to say Oakland doesn't have its own challenges, because it absolutely does. I think it's just a lot easier to see like how we are segregated here in Chicago, and all the challenges that really come from that.
Right. And could you talk a little bit about the difference between equity and equality?
Yeah.
Because those two words get conflated a lot, and I think the difference is important.
Yes, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that, because I hear it all the time, like them being conflated, and they're very different, right?
Mhm.
Equality means that each section or each person gets the same exact thing, and it doesn't account for systemic racism. It doesn't count for the years and years and years of inequity that has maybe gotten Todd more opportunities,
Mm.
and will continue to get Todd more opportunities. So if Todd was born as a white presenting man, and Chanelle is born as a Black woman, just alone, there are systems in place to provide for Todd in a way that does not provide for me, that actually oppresses me. So if we go to college and Todd has a lot of upper hand, he gets more scholarships because they like the way his name sounds, or you have more financial opportunities because your parents had a upper hand as a white family or a white presenting family. And I don't have the same opportunities because of the inequity that exists in the world. If you give Todd $5,000 and Chanelle $5,000, that's equality, but it's not equity, because it's not accounting for the systems in place that are meant to oppress.
Mm.
So equity is actually accounting for that. It's saying,
Gotcha.
actually, Todd doesn't need that $5,000. Chanelle needs $10,000 because she's living in a world where she has been oppressed. She doesn't have as many opportunities. We're trying to level the playing field as much as we can so that they can both be able to reach what they want to reach. And so
Right.
giving the same amount to each party does not actually move towards equity. It actually continues to have that unequal footing because we're living in this world.
Gotcha.
That's what it is.
And this is where so much of the misunderstanding can arise, where people think, hey, I don't dislike anybody, or I like people no matter what color they are, right? And then you have this gap, this wealth gap of average white household is worth 10 times that of the average Black household. And it starts to explain it with what you're saying about equity, and the systemic problems. The systemic problems are larger than any one person's perspective. You could even have a system where people were making progress in the way that they treat each other, but the system is still inherently racist or effectively racist. So there's so many levels to what you're saying that it's shedding light for me and helping me to understand better.
Yeah, the
So
pulling yourself out by the bootstraps is just
mm,
such a lie. It's such a lie in America that we tell ourselves and that we tell other people, that don't account for the reality of the oppression that people of color face every day, and the systems that are, like we said earlier, that are designed to do exactly what they're doing, which is
mhm.
to not allow them to succeed. Um,
Yeah.
and to continue to uplift and put forth white people to lead companies, organizations, and our country.
Yeah. And there's some overlap with power structures too, and wealth in America and economic systems, because we're we think we're founded on this great principle of merit, that, oh, if you work hard enough, you'll get everything you want in this country, and that's been the American dream. But it's not a reality. People rarely move from, say, the bottom quintile to the top quintile economically. It just doesn't happen. Like less than like 2% of Americans can ever make that jump, and people start out way ahead in this whatever race it is that's becoming more and more of an American nightmare.
Yeah.
And it's like a game of Monopoly. We're seeing that, you know, if somebody's starting out on the board game with owning Park Place and with hotels on it, you're not, doesn't matter how motivated you are, right?
Yeah.
So there are some, you know, some deep issues that we have to work to resolve together, and
Yeah.
fundamental change.
And I have mentioned earlier, like you were white presenting. I just want to get
Mm.
into that a little bit if you're
Yeah, sure.
that, because your background is actually like complex, and I just want to hear more about like what your familial background is, and how does that like impact your day-to-day experience here in America.
Well, I appreciate you asking that, Chanel. I don't really talk about it much, but I guess it's really meaningful here, or relevant here. So my father has different European Caucasian roots, German and Polish, and my mother is Mexican. My grandparents on her side were immigrants from Mexico. They overcame lots of challenges and also racism and oppression. There was a movement. I want to say it was maybe in the 30s of eliminating Mexicans from the United States, and a lot of people aren't aware of this history where so many Mexicans were sent back to Mexico. So that actually happened to my grandfather. He had immigrated, and he was also sent back, made it to the United States again. And so this time when he started a family, um, he really limited the amount of culture with his kids. He tried to just um, help them assimilate because he knew how oppressive the situation was. So he didn't teach them Spanish.
Mm.
And so my mother doesn't speak Spanish. I mean, she understands Spanish a little bit because both my grandparents spoke. So growing up with understanding that, um, I think planted a certain sensitivity in me to the way people treat each other, and to uh, the the struggle for equality, the struggle for equity, the struggle to belong. I mean, this is just the long struggle of humanity. But me personally, like I was never treated any like a person of color because you know, I'm white, and I didn't have much connection to Mexican culture, although I lived with my grandmother for a while and my great grandmother. Uh, so so yeah, so it's that was a little bit complex, and we moved around a lot. My father was in the Navy, so like I said, I was born in Oakland on the naval base, and my dad was mostly stationed in Asia when in my first years of life. So he was sort of getting a whole cultural expansion, which I think also helped me have more of a global view. When my dad started talking to me about Hong Kong and Japan and these other parts of the world, I really started to see myself as a citizen of the world, because we moved from there to Texas, to Indiana, to Illinois. Um, and I never really felt like anywhere was home. And then I went to school in DC, and then I lived in Ireland, and then I lived in India, and now I've been here in Illinois for some time. So I think because of the upbringing that I had and the parents that I had a certain kind of curiosity, but also sensitivity and care for anyone who's disadvantaged, really.
Mm.
Also,
Mhm.
in terms of racism towards Black people and African Americans, it wasn't something that I really understood how current it was growing up because of some of the environments that I lived in.
Mhm.
Especially when I was in Indiana for some time, there really wasn't a lot of Black people that I had access to or that I was spent time with in a few of those communities. But I do remember one time when we were moving from from that neighborhood to Illinois, my parents showed our house to a Black family, and that was all good to us. But afterwards, while they were considering whether or not they were how seriously they were interested in buying our home,
Mhm.
neighbors came to talk to my parents uh, about what they were doing. They said, we noticed, you showed the house to a certain family, and we hope you'll take the rest of us into consideration before you would consider
The rest of
selling.
yeah.
And
Wow.
my mom and dad explained this to me and my brother at the time. I don't know how old we were, 10, 11, something like that. Uh, because I think they thought that they realized that was a teaching moment, and also seeing my dad push back so strongly against the rest of them was was a turning point for my awareness, and I guess my education about the severity of the challenges, and how deep some of the, not just the systemic, but how deep it is for some people in their own hearts. But they talked to us about it, and explained the problem that it is. So I'm grateful for my parents for that, and that was a really disturbing day,
Mhm.
but it was important, I think, for me to expand my awareness. Important to have the support of my parents to understand what was going on
Yeah. I
and
mean,
what I need to do.
that just like makes me think about the children growing up in this time right now.
Mm.
It's like, what is it like being a child in 2020, 2021? When you turn on the news and you see a mob take over your nation's capital, and you see them hanging up nooses, and you see them reenacting the murders of innocent Black people by police. I I wonder what conversations are being had with them at home, what conversations aren't being had with them at home, and like what is the role of teachers in this time. Like I saw a meme the other day that I'm tired, it said I'm tired of living through historical events. And I reposted it because it's
Mm.
so real. I'm so tired of every day or every week is another historical event that is traumatizing that I'm living through. But I also made me think of like, man, what role, what responsibility do parents and teachers have while we live through these historical and traumatizing events to mold our children who will be the next leaders of our country. Um, yeah, I don't have any children yet, and I'm not in the classroom anymore, but it just seems like a really heavy responsibility.
Super heavy, and I don't think people realize how traumatizing it is, especially for people of color, minorities, to see hatred broadcast. And yeah, the secondary traumatic stress is real. So the images that we see, the historical events you mentioned that we're living through, is stuff that will take probably decades to fully heal from.
And we're consuming it at such a rapid rate, because a lot of the things that we're seeing, it's not new. uh, these actions, these violent crimes, these hate crimes have been going on for generations, right? The difference in what I'm seeing is just how public now they are and how easy to consume they are. Social media didn't exist during the
Mm-hmm.
civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so our children can be in their room and we think that they're studying and they're just consuming all of these hateful things
Yeah.
that are easily, readily available for
Mm-hmm.
them to access. Um,
Yeah. This is the paradox of social media. I mean, we're seeing the consequences of bad ideas being able to spread, and what fringe ideas being able to um, connect connect people, dangerous ideas. And we're seeing its effect on mental health. And at the same time, we wouldn't know about some of the stuff that is actually out there, and we wouldn't be able to get regular people wouldn't have a voice without some of these tools. So it's messy, right?
it is messy. It has definitely been an experience for me these last 4 years with the administration we've had to see so publicly people who hate me, who don't know me. Um, I think I'm sure I'm not alone, but just to be honest, I think I was living in this false sense of security for all of my adulthood life. Like I felt like I knew that I was oppressed. I knew that I had challenges. I knew that I was going to have to work twice as hard as my white counterpart to get half of what they have. I knew that, police brutality was alive and well. Um, but I just don't think I truly, truly understood that there were so many people out there who truly hate me, um, and truly want me to disappear or die, just because of the color of my skin. I think was starting to believe that we were moving forward as a country. Um, and this really just showed me that people were just hiding what they were feeling publicly. They still felt it. They still were seething, seeing, Black people in positions of power. They just felt the social pressures that if they were to speak up, like they would have some sort of accountability, I assume, for the most part. But these last 4 years, the administration has empowered these people to be just so blazing with their racism. And it really, I have to say, it really knocked the breath out of me. It really shook me up to really see the reality in which I'm living in, for the first time, truly seeing it.
Yeah. So that's so it's so painful to hear you say that. And then it's like, this is the shadow of the United States then, right? That's coming out. And so now we're shifting. How do you feel about the coming year, or do you see signs of hope now with new administration and unity in democratic unity, at least in Congress?
I'm scared.
It's because it's so much deeper than
Yeah,
one administration or one person, right? And
because I mean, yes, I do feel some sense of relief to know that Trump won't be in office anymore. I do, absolutely. But the people who he emblazoned and empowered are still here, are still Americans, are still our neighbors, are still our elected officials, are still our teachers, are still our doctors, are still our lawyers. I mean, there were legislators who were a part of this mob, CEOs, nonprofit leaders. These are everyday people. It's not just this mythical creature that you think a racist looks like. You know, they're everybody. They're people you go and buy your groceries from. And that scares me to know that they were this angry with the election results, that they would do something like this. And I think sometimes I sit and I wonder, okay, with the new administration, like how much more angry are they gonna get? And how much bigger will their acts of anger get until people start just killing Black people randomly, and until like the KKK gets higher membership. I'm scared, and I think I thought at this time, as we were getting closer to Biden being sworn in, that I would feel a little bit more at peace. But this week has really just like, I just feel like the goggles are off. I had some goggles on, and the goggles are off, and I'm afraid living in this country of what will happen to me, my friends, my family. I'm afraid to have babies in this world. The fact that they had a noose, Todd, they put a noose up, like they were chanting, "I can't breathe." There's so much hate. I mean, looking at those videos, like looking at their eyes as they were climbing the wall, how can they hate so many people they don't know? I don't get it. I don't get it. And yeah, I'm scared.
Yeah, I understand. And we have to, we have to keep on this, because even having like new leadership are symbols. It's not actual change, right? We'll have lots of nice speeches from new leadership, like unifying speeches or messages of unity, but I understand what you're saying, that that's not necessarily going to make you feel safe.
Yeah. And I'm also just kind of like frustrated with myself that I allowed myself to have a false sense of security for so many years, for my entire life. I'm kind of frustrated with my teachers and people who are in positions of power in my life that allowed me to feel this false sense of security.
What is the basis of the false sense of security, do you think?
I just think that,
because I think a lot of people, before this administration would say everything's good for everyone in America, right?
Yeah, and I definitely didn't say that or think that at all.
Right, but other people would
yeah, absolutely
promulgate that view.
You
like everybody has equality now.
Of course, if you don't, if it doesn't affect you, oh, we had a Black president. Oh, we did.
Right, exactly.
Like no, I didn't drink the Kool-Aid like that. I'm a Black woman. So every time I wake up, every time I leave my house, the world reminds me I'm a Black woman. Every time I try to negotiate my salary, or I try to elevate, and I see my counterparts be able to do so with ease while I struggle at times, I'm reminded I'm a Black woman, so that is not the reality I was like living in, that false sense of reality, right? But
right. Yeah.
I think I really understood like the physical danger.
But what you just described, most people would never know, or many people would never know.
To me,
That can be a daily
but they don't
reality.
want to know.
Hmm?
They don't want to know because there's just
And they don't,
too much
yeah.
data and information out there, that if you want to educate yourself on the reality of what it means to be a Black person in America, or you want to know about inequity in salary and promotions and opportunities, and how Black women are talked over in the boardroom, or how there are white leaders of organizations and corporations who still call grown men who work for them boy. Like, this is real and accessible for you to find out if you want to. But if you want to continue to live in a bubble, of course you're going to say, oh, that's not the truth, that's not the reality, we've come so far. And it's just,
And that's part of the problem, that those
exactly.
bubbles, and especially like in a place like Chicago where it's so segregated, so you don't have to see what it's like in this neighborhood. You don't have to see what's right.
Yes, like that's the whole, that is like the goal,
Mm-hmm.
moving to suburbia, right? Like, you don't want to see the poor people on the street. You don't want to see racism. You don't want to see inequity. And you don't want your kids to see it either.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what does that create? What kind of adults does that create doing that? To me, it creates the adults that we saw this week, was so bold and blazing to say, I didn't get my way, so I'm going to take it.
Mm-hmm. And what you're saying about the data's there, that even when you have some diversity, even when you have people of color in the workplace, they still have these hurdles. And so even in schools where there's some diversity,
And
I've read that.
it's not like, people talk about diversity as if that is a silver bullet.
Right.
Well, there's equity and inclusion as well.
Mm-hmm.
You can have someone who is in senior leadership of a corporation, but no one listens to them. And it's a person of color, but no one listens to them when they speak in the boardroom. Or you can have, a CEO of an organization, and they're paid significantly less than their counterparts of other CEOs of comparable organizations. Like, equity and inclusion is just as important as diversity. And I think that also makes people feel like, oh, we're doing so much because we had a Black president, we had this, we had that. Okay, but how much was our Black president able to do without white people specifically, getting in his way to stop him every turn he made?
Mm-hmm. And also, what does a Black president or a Black person in a senior role somewhere, what does that say about the Black people's experience? It doesn't necessarily mean anything's different. And so I think people love those symbols of change,
Yeah, people love to
because
be.
it's like, all right, now we don't have to talk about this anymore. There's been a Black president. There's nothing more to talk about. Right?
It's wild. And man, I was so angry watching those images and the videos of them storming the Capitol this week. But I also, I've been seeing a lot online, and it really resonates with me what I've been reading about, just like, this is not my mess. This is not Black people's mess. This is white people's mess. And I need white people to get up and clean this up.
Yeah, I agree. We have to open our eyes and and not accept this. White people have to understand that privilege isn't just, isn't just something positive that you get. So I think when white people think about, when we think about the word privilege, it triggers something in so many people, like, well, you know, I didn't get an inheritance, or no one opened some special door for me. It's like, that's not the only kind of privilege. It's also about what you don't experience.
Or you could be a poor white man
Mm.
um, in a small city in America and still have more privilege than a Black person with more opportunities than you opportunities. Um, because that Black man who maybe grew up in a nice neighborhood and this white man who grew up in a poor city, when that Black male gets approached by a police officer, his experience could be deadly versus your experience as a white poor man in that city being approached by a police officer might not be.
Exactly.
It won't be.
Right.
There's
So,
so many
yeah.
levels to privilege. I think that
Right.
we
Right.
associate privilege with money
Right.
and access,
Right.
uh, but there are so many other ways that
Mm-hmm.
someone could be
Yeah.
living
Yeah.
in.
So it's also about what's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's about what's not there, also, people don't realize they don't have that, they lack the empathy. And basic things too, like really basic things, like having access to healthy food, having access to clean air. We know there are neighborhoods in the south side of Chicago and other parts of Chicago, predominantly Black or people of color. They haven't had access to quality air. They haven't had access to a park. They haven't had access to water. There has been problems in the water, not just in places like Flint, Michigan, but also in Chicago.
Yeah.
And it's hard for other people to see, well, no, I got that water, food, air thing. The very basics of life is a privilege. It's a privilege if other people are denied and have been denied that. And the advantage is that you enjoy because of that, or that we enjoy because of that. So
That makes
yeah.
me think, Todd, like all of this is so heavy, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of this, when you like talk about it, when you think about it, when you process it, it's just so much to take in and to process. Like with your work in meditation and mental health, like how important is meditation and mental health in the lives of Americans right now? And like, what do we need to do differently to prioritize it so that we can be able to
Yeah.
unpack all of this mess, all of this muck? Because
Yeah.
I too often see activists and people who are fighting the good fight taking their lives or dying unexpectedly,
Mm-hmm.
because this is just it's so overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. And on that note, I also want to thank you for the courage that you had in your TED talk to talk about depression
Mm.
and talk about your struggle and your journey, because that's part of the problem, that there's a stigma. There's such a strong stigma with mental health, especially for people who are motivated to help, right? Because we're supposed to be all good and have the energy and the stamina to just keep fighting the good fight, as you said. Anybody in a helping profession, there's a little bit of shame if you're not all right on the inside,
Mm.
because we're just expected to be on all the time. So I do think it's important to include oneself in this in compassion, and to prioritize self-care, just like the analogy of putting the oxygen mask on first. I think compassion really ought to begin here in one's heart and expand from there. It's like, okay, I'm taking care of myself, taking care of the earth and the land around me and the people around me, and just do not let it stop, but do not neglect yourself. If we're trying to solve the world's problems and we're neglecting our own well-being, well, we're going to burn out.
Yeah.
And I want to prioritize meditation. I think I give so much emphasis to that because I see that as a foundation for solving these problems. Meditation expands one's heart, it expands one's empathy, it changes structures in the brain that are associated with taking the perspective of others. It explains why people can do a meditative or contemplative practice, even something like yoga, and end up crying because they didn't see how people have struggled. They didn't have the open heartedness yet, and somehow like this knot gets untied. And I've also looked at research that shows was as people ascend socioeconomically, their compassion diminishes,
Mm,
which is scary.
yeah.
So like it actually changes us unless you have some kind of grounding practice, that something that tunes you in to the collective. And so for me, this is a practical way to fight these problems. If I can get to people's hearts through the podcast, through teaching, um, and plant these seeds, people can change.
Mm,
And I have seen it. So I mean that's my motivation, at least, is to come at this from two sides. So we got the social justice work,
yeah.
and then we got this healing work. Like everybody, and this is also the problem, everybody has some trauma, it seems like, or some trauma, and we're in the like trauma Olympics. Well, I didn't get this, or I got beat up as a kid, or I wasn't popular in school. And so it's hard for us to take care of each other because everyone's like trying to prove that their suffering was the worst.
Oh, people of color do that all the time with each other.
Mm,
Black and Latinx to Asian. Like I I really hope we can move closer to working together to dismantle
right.
white supremacy and not do the oppression Olympics, because I see that happen all the time. I'm very curious about
Yeah.
like the meditation and the yoga like piece of things. I've always thought that culture um, of like mindfulness and inward introspectiveness is beautiful, and I want to start doing it more. I also have seen people who like co-opt that culture uh, and still do so much harm to others, still perpetuate um, uh, white supremacy in their everyday life, but will go to, meditation retreats and practice yoga 20 times a day. And so, like, I'm just so curious of what you think about that, because I'm sure you've come across people like that in your practice. It's like, how do you tell someone who thinks that they are being mindful, that thinks that they are living out a lot of the beautiful tenets of meditation and
Mm,
but are actually doing significant harm to people around them?
hmm. Well, capitalism and materialism infiltrates everything. So spiritual materialism is a real phenomenon that people try to turn it into a commercial enterprise, and that's what we've seen with yoga in the West. It is, yeah, it's so highly commercialized. I for me, I never had any desire really to teach or to work, to do it for any kind of work. I was just so dissatisfied with my stress and anxiety levels
Mm,
that I wanted to know more about who I was and to find something beyond the surface, the surface turmoil. So the interesting thing about mindfulness and contemplation and introspection is I started to see my own prejudices, the way I would judge people and the way that I would judge myself.
mm,
So the judgment is just like wired into us, wired into me, from culture, from conditioning, from whatever genetic codes are in there, and starting to see all that and to see how it creates suffering for yourself and others allows you to get some detachment from it.
mm,
And maybe we don't have so much judgment for other people. That's amazing if you fit into that camp. but most likely we still have a lot of judgment towards ourselves, a lot of criticism of ourselves. And those things happen automatically, they happen unconsciously. But becoming conscious of it is the beginning of developing a sense of equanimity towards these thoughts, towards all of these programs, these codes, and these conditionings. And we can start to respond to ourselves and others with more love. I mean, it was amazing what I would see my mind doing. I could look at somebody at a meal on a retreat or in an ashram in India and think, look at that person taking too much of this, or look at that person still sleeping. And my mind would just judge. And I'm like, I'm creating so much unnecessary suffering for myself and others, because now I'm more likely to say something rude, or even just the thinking of something rude makes my energy levels weak, makes me unhealthy. It hurts me, but we don't realize it. It all goes hidden. And it's until you have a practice like this, it's almost like all thoughts are fair game because it's inside, but we don't realize that thought is something, is an event. There are chemicals changing, there are neurons firing, and it's changing who we are. It's changing our biology. So I think this is a good foundation for loving ourselves, accepting ourselves. And I would say, like, healing in psychology, self-acceptance is half the battle. Like, I accept who I am, I accept my past, I accept what has happened, and now I'm going to integrate those experiences, painful and otherwise, as wisdom, and move positively forward to take care of myself and others.
Wow, that's so powerful. And not but that is so powerful, and it makes me think, what's the difference between judgment in like the superficial realm and holding people accountable for harm to others? Because I do also wonder how many people exist in the world right now who are living out that desire to not judge others and are remaining silent in the face of injustice. And so how do those two truths kind of like live together? And how do you strike a balance between making sure you're not, judging others, but also speaking up for what is right?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't think there's a simple answer, except that I think that it's possible that people are fundamentally good, but there are bad ideas. Bad ideas are like germs. And when somebody gets sick, or when someone catches something like the coronavirus, they're not a bad person, even though everything could change because they have that infection. For me personally, this is the way I approach it, which has helped me to overcome hatred and anger that is the destructive kind. When we can carry around a certain kind of rage that just burns us up inside, and it's not healthy for us or anybody else. But it is the judgment, it's the prejudice, it's the code, whatever that code is, or wherever it came from. Maybe it came from conditioning, maybe it came from religion, maybe it came from a cult, and that's the work, to uproot these bad ideas and to heal these bad ideas. So I guess that helps me, and I think one of the reasons why people might stay silent, I don't think it's a good reason, but we come to know that we are filled, people like me, I'm saying, have a lot of negativity. We have a lot of negative thoughts. And so since we're so negative on the inside, and this is a bias that most humans have, that like the negative thing is going to carry more weight than a positive thing. You can go for a job review, and if one thing is an area for growth and everything else is good, we'll remember that this is a survival mechanism in all of us. But because we have negativity in us, people feel as though that they're not qualified to step up or to stand up or to point out these injustices. But what I'm working towards and would like to share with others is that that all of this is our work.
Mm.
It starts with ourselves, and we got to hold ourselves accountable. We got to change. I just read a beautiful quote from an Indian monk who came to the United States 100 years ago, that changing your life is your part in the changing of the world. So we're trying to grow. People like me are trying to grow, trying to help others grow at the same time. And as long as you're including yourself, right, in your growth, because there is an asymmetry between how much we want others to change and how much we ourselves actually change.
Mm.
If every day I'm going to try to be a little bit better than I was than I was yesterday, then I'm engaged in that, and it's not hypocritical to support others or to point it out or to set boundaries. At the very least, we set boundaries. Like, look, this isn't healthy for me to be around. You're not listening to me, but I can't go there with you then, you know. And when people have boundaries set, it's just like in relationships. Okay, you can't disrespect me in that way. Well, if connection matters to you, then you get inspired to change. So sometimes we can't change people, but the boundaries let people know that the access codes to healing, to well-being, and to connection with our community is trust, respect, safety, and ultimately love and kindness.
Man, it's so beautiful and yet so hard. It's so hard. It sounds so simple and so like, of course, that's what we need to do, but it's so hard in practice.
Yeah. I'm reading a beautiful book right now called Journey of Souls, and it talks about why we come to Earth. It's by a doctor who was doing hypnosis with patients, and they would sometimes talk about experiences between between lives. Not to get too much on a tangent here, but one of the things that stood out to me was that Earth is this unique combination of competition and cooperation.
Mm.
So it's a huge struggle, but in this struggle is there's really an opportunity for the individual um, to develop courage, compassion, and universal love. So we have a lot of work to do, and you're right, and it is overwhelming. But as an individual, overcoming one's flaws, that is the real joy in life. It's not in having no flaws. It's about detecting them and uprooting them, and then helping others to do the same. So there is the potential for so much well-being, even in all of this chaos.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point because 2020 was how do you describe 2020? 2020.
It feels like it's not over though. That's how I describe it. It's the longest year because it's longer than a year.
Yes, it is. Yes, it's actually accurate. But it was just
It's now December, whatever, December 40th.
oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It really does feel like that. It was a crazy it was and is a crazy time. We're still living in it. But one thing I did really notice is in the midst of all the chaos and all the hatred that accompanied the death and despair and devastation, there was so much compassion. There was so much compassion.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel it when you say that, because it was like there was so many scenes of great compassion.
yes. Yes. And even in my like immediate ecosystem, I just felt so much compassion. From high school friends to middle school friends, to family I haven't spoken to in a long time. There was just such a desire to heal relationships, heal wounds, to check in on people you haven't talked to in a long time, and let them know that you still care about them, you love them, you want them to be healthy and happy. And I just feel like there was just an individual charge that a lot of people felt to be a lot more compassionate in their everyday life. And I think that showed.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, what a duality that scenes, traumatizing scenes of police brutality and violence, and also outpourings of love and empathy and service.
And I feel like everyone felt, I won't say everyone, obviously, because that's not the case, right? We wouldn't be in this situation if it was, right? But an overwhelmingly large amount of people felt responsible to push out compassion because of the circumstances everyone was in. And that's one thing I hope that we are able to keep once some sort of stasis is achieved, is that like individual responsibility that you were kind of talking about, to be compassionate. I think that everyone, got real stuck in their day-to-day life, and was really focused on that, and would say like, oh, I don't have enough time. There's not enough time in the day. I don't have enough time to like really be intentional with coming to the end of the day and being like, did I do something compassionate today? But I think if you ask people now, I think that they would say, whether they acknowledge it or verbalize it, they do kind of check in to see, did I do something compassionate this week? I should have reached out to so-and-so. I wonder how she's doing. I think that they need some food. Let me bring some food to them. I think there's just a lot more checking in on that happening.
I love that word intention, Chanelle. You talked about intention in your TED Talk too. With
you have to. If you're not intentional about, especially someone who deals with mental health issues and depression specifically, if I'm not intentional about my health, I will succumb to depression. It's a daily challenge. It's a daily decision. It's a daily commitment to say, I am going to overcome this today. And it's so interesting when like I got a lot of like interesting feedback from my TEDx talk where I talked about my challenges with depression, where people were just so shocked because I'm
you're so cheerful and bright and so pleasant to be around.
Yeah.
But I think you care about others so much, and it radiates out of you.
Thank you.
So yeah, I could see why it would be a surprise to people to know, like inside there's some days that are really hard and.
But it's just so interesting that people people like to put people in boxes. So you think that the only people who deal with depression are people who are like Eeyore, who's just like moping around all day. Like and I think that also is just like how we try to process emotions. We talk about them in the extremes, and so we think that that's what depression looks like. But depression looks like so many different things. Depression looks like you and I. Depression looks like anybody. It's that can take on anybody at any time. You could have never struggled with depression your whole life and it could hit you. And there's no one look of it all. And so I mean, it was a big deal for me to stand on that stage and say that, because I knew that there were going to be people who may look at me differently. I knew that maybe it could hinder my professional career But I also thought it was important to say like, hey, yeah, that joyous, happy girl that like you love to hang out with struggles and has to make a choice every day to say, I'm going to overcome this today. Every hour, every
Yeah.
minute, every breath, I have to decide I am not going to succumb to this.
Mhm.
And I know I'm not alone.
Well, that's what was so empowering about it, to know that, okay, you could have easily talked about something else or kept that side of yourself hidden. But in this time of stigma where people don't get help also,
Yeah.
I think only 1 out of 3 people who really need help with their mental health seek it out. And that's got to be because cultures don't support it. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it was a hard conversation to even have with my family.
Sure.
I went on stage and being like, yeah, you know, this is something I want to talk about. And I think people in my family from varying degrees knew about, you know, what I struggle with, and a lot of them don't. And especially in the Black community, it's just not, we don't talk about this, you know? And I feel like there were messages I would receive of like, you think your life is challenging? Let me tell you about what life is challenging, you know? And it's like, it doesn't have to be the oppression Olympics like we just talked
Yeah, right.
about.
And the tough thing, I think, for people understanding mental illness is it doesn't have to be tied to some external circumstances,
Yeah,
right? Like a person with severe depression can be handed a bag of money and I mean, they might feel a little perk from that for a minute, but that doesn't cure depression. It's not
yeah.
like, and this is how we shame people without realizing it, by saying,
Mhm.
but you have a family that loves you, or you have a good
Mhm.
career. It's like it's, if you think of it in terms of any other health condition, it doesn't make sense. Like, how can you have the flu? You have people who love you, right? So what you did was important so that people can see that this is a real thing that people struggle with. And if we acknowledge it and we accept each other, people can get the help they need. And because of intention, you can still live a life aligned with your purpose and your values,
And
which is
have
what you're doing.
joy and not
Mhm.
look like Eeyore.
And
So
not look like Eeyore.
even although if
Yeah,
you do look like Eeyore, that's valid too. And that doesn't, and
correct.
you shouldn't have shame for that as well. Um, and there shouldn't be a
Mhm.
hierarchy of how someone deals with their depression, and a gold standard way versus you know, a shameful way. Trying to manage your depression in any way that you do is commendable. And there has to be less shame about that. And I really do appreciate you saying that, like, depression doesn't necessarily mean that it's stemming from one event that happened, some traumatic event that happened to you, and you have it. Some people are just born with that. There's some people have a chemical imbalance. And I my earliest memories of existence, I remember sadness, and I
Mhm.
remember not being able to communicate it. Like, I had night terrors as a young child, and
Mhm.
I'd had dreams of people kidnapping me. I had these just overwhelming bouts of sadness, and was scared to talk about it to people. Um, and you know, that just grows and grows and grows and grows.
Right, right. So yeah, there's so much to our internal experience that no one would know. And I think, to add on to that, it's not helpful to try to convince somebody that they're not having those experiences or that they
Yeah.
shouldn't have those experiences. We think we're being helpful by pointing out reasons to be happy, but that's not how any illness works. I think so. For those who are looking for ways to be supportive and with loved ones who may be struggling with depression or another type of mental health concern, would be to just save that space for them and to let them know you're there for them, you're with them, and you support them whether they're feeling happy or not, and they don't have to become happy or cheerful or whatever for you to feel like you can still be in their life.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I think that has been something I've been trying to work through
mhm.
this last year. Really is um, saying, you know what, I actually don't feel joyous right now, and so I can't give you the joyous side of me. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then that's something you need to work on. I
Right,
I can't bear the weight of being this one dimensional person that you want me to be, because I'm not. So today I can't show up that way.
right,
I'm showing up how I need to show up to just
right.
be here.
And pressuring people out of that is sort of like saying, I can't be with you unless, you know, you fit into my idea of pleasantness.
Right.
Right? It's
Um,
very powerful to know somebody is with you, up or down. You know, your friend or your loved one will hold space for you and will offer you their presence, because connection is healing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And those little those little words, those little sayings that people will say when you're in a funk, of like, just like, come on out, come on, it'll make you feel better, or, just you have so many people who love you, or look at your life, that that just reads to me that you don't see me. You see what you want to see. And
Right.
seeing all of me makes you uncomfortable. And so at times, like, oh my God, I'm making my friend uncomfortable. Oh my
And
God.
that can trigger more shame for
Oh,
somebody who's already struggling with the
I have
shame
the
of their
same thing.
feelings. It's
Yeah.
like,
So
oh,
I'm making,
yeah, I do have people who love me. And I guess, you know, I'm wrong for feeling the way I feel.
mhm. Oh, and then I'm making their life inconvenience. And look at me, like, even when I'm going through something, I am making the people who I love go through that too. It's worse for them than it is for me. And you just go into, like, a black hole. Um or it's not that big of a deal. Oh man, that's a trigger for me for sure.
Mm,
um when people who love you say that, it's so harmful. It's so harmful,
yeah,
especially to someone who's dealing with depression, for you to say
right.
it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Because
So,
it's like, at what point is it big of a deal? Like, at what point does that person need to convince you that something serious is going on and that they're really struggling?
right. And this is what validation is all about, that people have their own experience there. And it ties into everything else we're saying, that people have an experience. We ought to listen. We ought to open our heart to that and
Yeah.
be present with that.
Yeah.
And what you said about acting was inspirational too, in your talk. So what motivated you into acting or into theater?
Yeah. Um, I went and saw a musical in high school, Hair. Um, Not
I
Hairspray.
never saw it, but I remember that one.
Yeah,
Uh,
not Hairspray.
Hearing about it. Not
Hair,
Hairspray, right? Hair.
which is like a very interesting high school
Yes, yes, I remember that. That's what I remember about it.
about drugs and sex and
Mhm,
love and and peace and
mhm.
unity. Um, and I remember, like, being like, what is this world? It just felt like I was transformed into a completely different world. I was a freshman in high school, and I was like, I don't know what that is, but I want to do it.
Mhm.
And I started getting involved in theater in high school after I saw that musical, and there was just such, like, beauty and power about transforming into a different person and transforming into a different world. And
Mhm.
I think, even as I'm talking to you now, I'm starting to realize there was, like, freedom in being able to explore feelings and emotions that I was feeling that I couldn't do in my day-to-day life. Crying about losing a partner. Um, and at the time, I hadn't lost a partner in my high school, but I had that overwhelming feeling of loss, and I'm able to channel that to something
Yeah.
that other people can watch and
Mm-hmm.
connect with. It gave me permission to like feel the emotions I have felt um, without any shame.
Yeah, I can relate to that in music because sometimes I would write songs that are about my experience, or I had a feeling like that in me, and this story channels it better. You know, it's not my story necessarily, so I can relate.
Yeah.
That's the power of art.
Yes. I mean, and it's so crazy how I come across people who downplay the power of art. And I just I never can understand it because I don't know anybody who goes through a day without coming across art.
Right.
The house in which you live in is art.
Right. Right. I
The
mean, I was just gonna say that. Yeah.
Yeah, like the television show, the book that you read, the music
Mm-hmm.
that you listen to, the clothes you put on, like everything that we touch has been made through artistry in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And um it baffles me that there are still people who downplay it. And
Yeah.
and it's terrible because our children need art to fully like grow into their brain. Their brain needs to grow with art around it at all times.
Yeah.
Because if they don't have that, I'm scared. I'm scared of the kind of adult they would be.
I agree. To create is to give, and
Yes.
that's why art is a gift, and life is art.
Yes.
People sometimes don't realize that, like, theater acting is life. Every This is your opportunity, right, to deliver your lines, to deliver your I love you to your partner in the best way, in the most sincere way. And that's always going on, like you said with Shakespeare, all the world is a stage. Every
Mhm.
act is just that. It's an act. It's your act. It's your life. And everything is an opportunity for you to express yourself creatively.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Art is a way of doing things. Like, I can just listen, or I can listen with my heart. I can prepare this meal, or I can prepare it with love. You know,
Yeah.
I can talk to you. I can talk with my friend, and it's just talking, or it's co-creating, and we're making magic. So I wish art was something that people really appreciated more,
Yeah.
because I see it, like, even in the pandemic, like, artists are struggling, artists suffering in so many ways, and in other ways it's gotten us through. you know Shows have gotten us through, music has gotten us through, so I hope people can
I
appreciate.
don't think people think
Mhm.
about it like that as art.
No, you're right. It's just like we feel entitled to it, like
It's like,
there should be something I want to see on on
yes,
Netflix. How come there's not something new that is captivating me? Yeah,
right.
we feel so entitled to it now.
Yes, like and God forbid it be something that doesn't meet our expectations. The outrage I see on my social media platforms of people just tearing tearing TV shows and movies apart that don't meet their expectation, instead of
Right.
actually what I think is powerful and beautiful, having a dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
a piece that you just consumed. Like, I just think that there is this, going back to judgment, there's this judgment filled world we're living in of like, is are you meeting my expectation of what I believe to be true or to be right, or are you not? Instead of like, I didn't like this piece because of this. I think that there could have been more of this. I think what I like about movies are this, and this piece didn't have that. Like, we could have like an intellectual, heart-filled conversation about pieces, and it doesn't have to be so like curt and crass and lack tact. on our platforms, because regardless if we like something or not, these are artists. Whether it's Wonder Woman or it's some Oscar nominated film, these
Mm-hmm.
artists spent their life and often risked their life. If we're seeing anything in the pandemic, risked their life to create this art for you, because it's a whole world pandemic happening. And so I think the least we can do is have a real conversation about the art piece, instead of this like, nope, like, let's talk about it. We are consuming art. Look, that's kind of crazy how much art people are consuming right now. Probably
Right.
more than ever.
Right. Yeah.
How many books we're
It's
reading?
gotten us through.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Could you imagine being on lockdown without
No.
art?
No.
Oh my
I
god.
mean, I can point to all the series and everything that got me through
Oh my gosh.
the
Yeah.
tougher moments, right? And music.
Oh, music. And and and,
Hmm.
and honestly, some of the artists that have been releasing some albums throughout the pandemic have been the best work they've done.
Oh,
Like the
yeah,
best,
that's for sure.
like Jasmine Sullivan's album that she just released. I mean, it's amazing. And so like there's like the stillness that being in the pandemic is providing artists, that I've seen people lean into that stillness to really dig deep and create something really meaningful.
Yeah. Difficult times like this and social crises produce like whole new genres.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Like
wow, the civil
entire
rights movement,
yeah.
the music, like the music to the civil rights movement is,
Oh, right. We continue to come back to it and we always will because it's transcendent.
uh-huh. Yeah.
No?
That's a really good point that I haven't thought of. Like, wow, the music and art that's going to come out of 2020 and apparently 2021, because
Because 2020 continues.
it's going
This
to,
year might be 2 years long.
oh gosh.
No,
Oh,
no.
man.
There are some signs that we're getting through.
Yeah, I think, and I definitely contributed to the, oh God, I can't wait for 2020 to be over. But it's just like, that 2020 is over, but the time in which we're living in did not.
Right.
It just like makes people feel better to not have to say 2020 anymore. But we're in the thick of it, and we'll see what it feels like to be on the other side. But it's just we're living through historical events, and that's just what it is right now. Um, yeah. Wow. It's been so nice talking to you, Todd.
It's been really nice talking with you too, Chanel.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed all our conversations.
Yes, I'm glad we recorded one.
Yeah, yeah.
Other,
So we'll have to do more too.
yes, because I mean we barely like scratched the surface
Yeah,
of what is going
we
on.
just dipped our toes in a few really serious topics though. So I'm glad we touched on a lot of different meaningful things for people.
Yes, yes. Part two to come.
Okay, I look forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you too, Chanel.